All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Today we're going to learn about PCC Paralegal, a career as a paralegal. But before that, let's do a little check-in. As you know, you have to check in so that your teachers know that you're here and not anywhere else. If you have a questions, this is a great questions document that you can reference to. And this is the evaluation form that you need to do right after this event, because this is how we give you attendance, give you credit, and this is requirement for you to graduate in Oregon. Be fully present, ask questions. We have Aubrey from PCC, and this is a good time to ask questions what PCC can offer. And again, submit your evaluation right after the event. So every knowledge you gain, everything is still fresh. So that is it for me. Let's have Aubrey.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. I hope that you're having a good day. It is like sunshiny here in Portland today, so that's wonderful. I am here to talk to you about paralegal careers, and I'm going to talk a little more generally about legal careers and different roles on the legal team. So if you already have an inkling that you're interested in the law, this is a great place to ask questions. I have a lot of sort of facts and figures that I'll give you about the career and preparation for the career, but I'm really interested in, just making myself available to answer your questions. So please do feel free to enter them or let somebody know you have a question so they can put it in the chat for me to answer. I thought I'd start just by telling you a little bit about myself and then talk about the legal profession generally, give you some information about training and salaries and job growth in the different legal professions, and then tell you about the PCC Paralegal Program so that if what you heard sounds good to you, the next place you could go here in Portland to get further training. So if that sounds good, I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. And I will, have this slideshow, but I will have the chat also. If I can figure out how to do that, let's see. Well, I'm sure somebody will let me know if questions show up in the chat.
Yeah, I will read it to you.
Thank you so much. Okay, I just want to tell you a little bit about myself. I live here in Portland, and I am a faculty member at Portland Community College. And before I came to PCC, I was an attorney, and I worked at an environmental law clinic. So I worked on behalf of public interest organizations. Some you might have heard of, like the Sierra Club or Earth Justice or Greenpeace. You might have heard of some of those groups. And most of my work, and so that was at Lewis and Clark Law School, which is the law school here in Portland, Oregon. And I worked there for about 8 years. And the focus of my work was air quality and suing people who were polluting the air. And that's why I went to law school. That's what made me interested in becoming a lawyer, was that I wanted to do environmental protection work. And so that had come, my desire to do that had come about because I had been involved in environmental education. So I'm sure you guys have done things like go out to outdoor school or have a camping week. And that kind of environmental education is what I was doing. And I was really inspired to think I could actually change the system that was having effects on the environment that I didn't like or appreciate. And so that's why I decided to go to law school, and amazingly was able to actually do that kind of work once I graduated from law school. Before I ever went to the law school, I had about 5 years between college and law school where I did some really fun stuff like organic farming, and had did some traveling, and had, just experiences that helped me understand the context of law school. So I felt like taking a break between college and law school was a really great idea. My undergraduate degree originally is in social work. So I worked with individuals and groups, mostly to try to help them address their problems. Turns out that that's exactly what lawyers do too. So social work and lawyering are kind of both helping professions. And so what a helping profession is a profession where people come to you with their problems, whether that's a business that has a problem getting supplies to make their product, an individual who's going through a divorce or is having issues with child custody with their former spouse, someone who has a problem with where they live, someone who wants to buy a big fancy building, like basically whatever people want to do, whether they're individuals or businesses, they go to lawyers to help them accomplish their goals and solve their problems. So people in the legal profession basically spend their time thinking about people's problems and then doing lots of reading and writing to advocate on behalf of other people. So if someone, for example, got evicted from their apartment, they may have, they get an eviction notice and they're not sure what to do. A legal resource would be the kind of resource that could help them understand their choices, what leverage or advantage they might be able to have with their landlord, and just address any problems that they had with the apartment itself. And that kind of legal support is really helpful for people. Unfortunately, not everybody gets access to that kind of legal help. And the vast majority of people can't afford to pay for a lawyer, and we don't have the resources as a country or as a society to provide that for everyone. So one of the ways that legal services can be more affordable is that if we can have people who have a little bit less education providing that legal assistance, that would make it more affordable. So that is a paralegal, someone with some education specific to the law, but not with a full law degree. Paralegals work very closely with attorneys. Paralegals generally are not regulated, but attorneys are. And so to be an attorney, you actually have to get a license. Not just anybody can go put up a shingle and say, I'm going to give legal advice because I did some research and I know how to avoid eviction or how to file a forced eviction defense case, right? Or I did my own divorce, so let me help you do your divorce. That is actually called unlawful practice of law. And nobody's allowed to do that unless they have a license from the state bar. The bar organizations in each state get to decide their own rules. And so each state licenses its own attorneys. I'm a licensed attorney here in Oregon. And whenever if I were to move to Texas and want to practice law, I would have to go through the whole process in Texas as if I was a brand new lawyer, even though I've already been a lawyer for 15 years. So unlike some other professions, like a social worker, for example, I could go from state to state and be a social worker, that's fine. For lawyers, you have to seek admission in each state that you want to practice in. The other thing that sets attorneys sort of apart as a profession like doctors is that we're responsible if something we do in giving advice harms our client. So for example, if I have a client that comes to me and says, I got hit by a car and I've been injured, the first question I need to ask them is when that occurred, because then I have to figure out how long they have to file their case. You only get a few years after something bad happens to you to file a claim. And so if I had a client that came to me and said, I got hit by a car, I would say, how long ago did that happen? And make sure that I knew the deadline for filing the complaint. If I didn't do that, and I let that deadline go by, that person could sue me for whatever they would have gotten if I had filed the case on time. So we have a duty to our clients to give them reasonable advice, to give them diligent service, to keep track of their matters, and to keep their secrets. So we have specific duties to our clients that are defined by each state. So like I mentioned, really the job of a lawyer, despite what you might see on television about what a lawyer does, is to really quickly be able to assimilate, that is, remember and organize facts, to identify and distinguish facts that matter. So you have to know the law, so you know which facts are going to matter to a situation. It's a lot of reading and writing. The job is very different depending on what kind of law you might be interested in. So not all attorneys ever go to court. Many attorneys don't ever go to court. So those attorneys that do are called litigating attorneys, and they're the ones you might imagine doing opening statements and questioning witnesses and talking to juries. That's just one flavor of attorney, though, and there are others that might be writing contracts. They could be negotiating things between companies. They could be offering legal opinions to companies about how they can comply with the law. They could be working with individuals to address legal problems that don't require going to court. So there are lots of things that people need to do, like, for instance, change their name or get their record. Say you got arrested when you were 16 and you have a juvenile issue on your record, you can get that expunged, which means it goes away, but you have to file the right form. And so you need some legal assistance to tell you which forms to file. All of these are things that lawyers do every day in lots of different subject matter areas, most of which probably sound not that compelling. I don't know. Maybe you are like, I love taxes. It's my favorite time of year when everybody starts freaking out about their taxes. But usually people are attracted to the types of law that we're more exposed to. And those things are things like criminal law. So being a criminal prosecutor, a district attorney, or being a criminal defense lawyer, someone who represents accused people and makes sure that they have their constitutionally protected right to legal assistance. And then there are many other kinds of litigation. So you might, be involved in landlord-tenant litigation, environmental litigation, like I was, consumer protection, personal injury. There are just so many different subject areas. Basically, anything that's happening, there's some law about it. So if you're really interested in sailboats, there's a whole area of law called maritime law and admiralty that deals with boats. And if you're really interested in trains, etc., I mean, whatever you're interested in, if you're interested in making music, there's intellectual property law. So how do you protect your music once you've created it to keep people from taking it and not giving you any money for it? So lots of ways, lots of different areas of practice. So what does it take to be a lawyer? It's going to feel like it's a real long time from where you're sitting when you could become a lawyer, because it takes 7 years of post-high school college. You have to first get a bachelor's degree, which traditionally takes 4 years. I know that tons of people are getting lots of credits done early through dual enrollment with PCC and other community colleges, as well as just taking classes directly while you're still in high school. So some people are able to get their undergraduate degree in 3 years instead of 4, or, just depending on your situation, you might be able to get your bachelor's degree relatively, in less time. But law school is 3 years long, and it's not the only way to get a shorter law school experience is to go to a college that has a joint undergraduate law degree that you might be able to get in 6 years. So it cuts off a year, some of these dual programs. So it's 3 years of law school. And then once you're done with law school, after you passed all your law school classes and graduated, which is a huge accomplishment, you now have to go take the bar exam and pass the character and fitness portion. So you have to tell the bar everywhere you've ever lived. You have to tell them every job you've ever had. You have to tell them every parking ticket, every speeding ticket, every brush with the law, and it doesn't mean that you can't be a lawyer if you get in trouble along the way in your life. It just means you're going to have to explain yourself and explain why you're more responsible now. I'm assuming that some of you may at some point think about going to law school. And so if that's you, there's lots of number one, if you're interested in going to law school or becoming a paralegal, I want you to know that you can contact me at any point. Like 5 years from now, you could be like, that lady from PCC said I could call her, and you totally can, and say, I'm getting ready to go to law school and I'm a bit confused. It's a process, and it can be very confusing and overwhelming. You don't have to cross that bridge anytime now, except to know that basically 2 things are going to determine which law school you get into, and that is your GPA in college, your grade point average, and your score on a test called the LSAT. So once you graduate from college, you have to take a test called the Law School Admissions Test, and your score on that test is going to be really important for where you're able to go to law school. So lots of process. All of this, many people think should lead to great salaries and great quality of life. And generally it does. These are good paying family wage jobs. They are not necessarily 6-figure jobs. There are types of lawyers who get paid a lot, and there's lots of lawyers who get paid about average for their metro area. And when you put those 2 things together, you get a average, mean, that sounds pretty good. 98,000 a year. I'm into that. I've never made that much. I've always been down here with this bell curve with the 30,000 to 70,000 people. And that's fine. I didn't want to move to New York City or LA and work in a big giant law firm. So it has to do with the choices that you make. I just want to make sure people know that it's not you go to law school and then everybody that goes to law school makes $150,000 a year. It's just not how that works. So given all that about the training required and all the testing required, another option to get involved in the legal field that you can do with a high school degree is becoming a staff member for an attorney. So that could be something called a paralegal, could be something called a legal assistant. A lot of people that worked in law offices used to be called legal secretaries, but we've kind of gotten rid of that term. And so now there might be program assistants, file clerks, receptionists, sort of more specific job titles. And then administrative assistants who do work, essentially helping the attorneys produce the work they need to produce. So, helping them with their word processing, helping them evaluating evidence using spreadsheets. So lots of staff roles. And you always have to be supervised by an attorney. You get paid a salary. You don't pay directly from your clients. And you do a lot of the behind the scenes work. So only attorneys are allowed to go to court, stand up in front of judges and represent people. But the people in the work in the law office can pretty much do everything other than that. They can draft legal documents. They can write letters, they can interview clients, sort of all the things that you think of happening in the law office, paralegals and legal assistants can do. The things that are important, so aptitudes, detail-oriented. You're the person who notices typographical errors or things don't look right, margins are off. This is not me. My margins and if I was left to my own devices, my things would look terrible. And so that's not an aptitude that I have, but it may be an aptitude that you have. Being able to work under deadline and under pressure is also very important. So as I mentioned, we've sort of gotten rid of secretaries. So paralegals are not secretaries. Also, like I said, you can do a paralegal job just with a high school education if you can convince a lawyer that they ought to give you a job. That's all it takes. Should you get further education? Most people do. So most paralegals at this point have college degrees, and they may have some specific training as paralegals, like with a 2-year degree in paralegal. So a lot of paralegals have 4-year bachelor's degrees and stuff like English, history, political science. And then they also might be people with 2-year degrees specifically in paralegal. Salaries for paralegals are good. These are nationwide numbers. 50,000 in Portland is not great in 2018. In terms of being able to support a family. But these are national averages. And so this is more than the national average for all occupations. So it's more than average for everybody. I've already sort of explained this. Other aptitudes and skills, if you love reading, like if you just cannot put down a book when you start reading, if you love writing, a legal job is one that you would likely enjoy because you spend most of your time reading and writing. Do you have an analytical mind? That is, are you logical in how you think? Can you reason out the answers to things? Can you solve riddles? Are you a good problem solver? Those are good aptitudes for the legal field. One that is interesting to think about is whether you feel comfortable representing, what kinds of people you feel comfortable representing. And if you don't feel like you can represent somebody else's interests because of your own beliefs or your own perspective, that's something you should consider, because that's going to limit who you can represent. And then for lawyer jobs, an interest in communicating orally, articulating things for people, explaining things to people, making presentations. Those are kinds of things that lawyers do. And this is not to say that if you're not into public speaking, that you can't be a lawyer. You will just have to go through a process of getting used to it. I used to be terrified of public speaking. I'm not now, just because I do it all the time. Here, I've just given you a little chart that you can see the differences between an attorney and a paralegal in terms of education, the cost of education, average starting salary, and this is for Portland. So the 50,000 was for nationwide, and the 82 is for Portland. Compare that to 122 for attorneys. A paralegal career is portable from state to state, whereas with attorneys, you have to get admitted in every state, as I mentioned. In terms of focus, paralegals are the detail-oriented people. They always know what's going on in the case. They are masters of the evidence and details of a case. Whereas attorneys are usually focused on the larger strategy, how to staff the case, what legal issues to examine and do research into, those kinds of questions. In terms of liability, attorneys are going to be liable if they do something that harms the client. Paralegals are not personally liable. It's their attorney that's going to be liable, not them. And then I just wanted to mention the different types of places where you might be able to work as an attorney. Law firms, so 75% of attorneys and legal staff work at law firms. There are big fancy law firms. There are tiny law firms with 2 attorneys. So 75% of attorneys work in law firms, but they're all sort of different sizes and different types. Large law firms, particularly in big cities, this is where you're going to be required to generate a certain amount of income every month for the firm. There are perks, like usually meals are provided because you're not expected to be able to feed yourself because you're spending all of your time working. They usually have really, really nice offices, good views. You wear fancy clothes to work every day. That's sort of life in a big law firm. And some people are really attracted to that. Small law firm life, you're more of a Jill of all trades or a person of all trades, meaning you have to know a little bit about how to do everything because there are few of you in the office. And here it's, I've seen some really beautiful relationships between people who work together for a long time in law firms because there has to be so much trust between attorneys and their staff. It can be really wonderful, family-oriented work environment, or it can be super toxic depending on who are the people who work at a law firm. So you got to find the right fit. 25% of attorneys work in other places. In-house counsel is an option. That's where you work for an individual corporation. So I might go work for Nike and do intellectual property to protect their shoe designs. Or I might work for Intel and help them get permits to build new factories around the world. But I only have one client, and that is that corporation. And then the government is a huge employer. So if you've always been attracted to the government, or you thought you might want to run for office, or like it'd be cool to be president, it'd be cool to work for the government. You still get to make governmental decisions and administer governmental programs. And lawyers are probably the most common government employee. So there's lots of lawyers working for the government, and they work at all levels of government and in all the branches of government. So if you're interested in government, lawyer is a great sorry, I just noticed there were some questions in the chat, so I wanted to just look at them real quick. I think I'm pretty much finished after I talk about nonprofits, which is just another option. So these are like legal aid organizations. Only 2 to 3% of lawyers work for nonprofit organizations, public defenders, and in education. So when you think about 98% of lawyers do something other than legal aid, public defense, and those sort of things that we think people need, there are very few people out there doing it. So nonprofits don't pay as well, but usually you get more time off, and that's the trade-off that you have for your work-life balance. And then just here are some facts and figures about salaries and job growth. The take-home point is they're good salaries, and the job outlook is good, 10% growth, anywhere from 8% to 10% growth. Which is great. Same thing between paralegals and legal assistants. It's essentially the same. So let me address the questions in the chat if that's okay. And then I'll tell you about the PCC Paralegal Program and see if I can generate some questions. So, do criminal defense lawyers represent themselves? Can they? Well, anybody can represent themselves. So no matter what kind of case it is, if you individually are in court, you can represent yourself. You don't have to have an attorney. No one is forced to have an attorney ever. The question is, should you? The answer is no. The saying is, someone who represents themselves has a fool for a client. And we say that particularly about attorneys representing themselves, because if you think about it, there's something going really wrong. It's incredibly stressful. Your life is suddenly different than it was before if you find yourself in need of a criminal defense attorney. And so it is going to be much more effective for that lawyer to have another attorney who's representing them. So can they? Yes. Should they? Probably not, but it depends in every situation. Can you start being a paralegal and then move on to becoming an attorney? Absolutely. So say you graduated from high school and you thought, I want to get into a legal career, I think, but I'm not really sure. I don't want to dedicate the next 7 years of my life to it because I'm not quite sure that that's what I want to do. You could pursue an associate's degree in paralegal, which is a 2-year degree. You could also, get to know every lawyer you could possibly get to know and talk to them about your interest and what you want to do, and see if an attorney is willing to have you start working in their office, maybe as a file clerk or as a receptionist, and then learn things about the practice of law while you're working there. And then you can always go to law school. You can always go back to school. Many people go back to law school after a break from college. You can't, so the next question is, do you go to court trial as a paralegal to assist the attorney? And there are paralegals who are litigation assistants who absolutely go to trial, and they're typically not allowed to sit at the table where the lawyers are sitting. They sit behind what's called the bar that you have to be a member of to get in front of, and sort of keep track of stuff from the back of the room, or might run up and give a document or help the attorney with something. If you have previous criminal convictions, could you still be a paralegal? This question is actually much easier to answer for attorneys, because absolutely you can still be an attorney if you have criminal convictions in your past. So it's not, I think, probably more than other professions, that lawyers appreciate the fact that people can rehabilitate themselves. They also appreciate the fact that the system doesn't always work the way it's supposed to, and there's lots of people who get convicted of stuff that they should never be convicted of. So there's an inquiry. The bar looks into each individual candidate to become an attorney to see if they have the right character, and so they'll consider, did you drink and drive when you were 21, and are you 30 now, and you've never had that problem since? You're not going to not be able to be an attorney because of that in most states. But for a paralegal, there's no process like that. There's no regulation. So it's just, can you get somebody to hire you? If you have one thing is, do you have to tell on your job application? Like, what do you owe a potential employer in terms of information? And I think that depends on what the employer asks. But let's say the employer asks you for, I want to know every time you've been in trouble with the law, so you feel like you must disclose that. The attorney is going to make a judgment about you and whether they think it's riskier to have you on staff or not. And that's going to have a lot to do with their individual perspective on things. So could you still be a paralegal? Absolutely. Could you be really frustrated and not be able to get a job? Potentially. It's best to try to stay out of trouble as much as possible, just generally speaking. The less you can interact with the law, the better. Do attorneys get exempted from jury duty? No, I've actually served on a jury and know other attorneys who've served on juries. So no, you still get to be on juries. Is there a particular grade that students in middle school and high school should achieve in order to be an attorney or paralegal? So you just want to do the best you can. You want to be, is there a certain cutoff? No, there's not a certain cutoff. Where you're able to go to law school is going to be determined by your college grades. Your high school grades are going to determine where you could go to college. So there's not a direct answer. There's not a black and white rule. Do you need to be good at debate? No. I mean, you don't have to be good at public speaking. You don't have to be good at debate. You don't have to be an actor. You don't. If you want to be a trial attorney and stand up in front of juries and try to convince them to convict people or to not convict people or to award millions of dollars to your client who got run over by a truck, you should be good at talking to people and conceiving of why they should care about your client, and those sort of considerations. But it's not oratorical ability that makes a good lawyer. It's preparation, seriousness of the task, concentration. If you have those things, you'll be able to do the presentation when you need to do the presentation. If you know your case cold and you know what you need to convince the jury, and it's something you want to do, you'll eventually get there. Is it easier for people who have a background in forensics or debate? Potentially, but actually, in my experience, when folks have told me they used to be on the debate team, or they used to do forensics, or were in plays, especially the debate people, I don't know that the way that debate is learned in the US is actually related at all to good lawyering. So I find the approach of people who've been in debate, they kind of have to sort of readjust, because it's not exactly the same approach. And so it's almost like being, you're really good at scuba doesn't necessarily make you good at golf. What was the best part of being an environmental attorney, and what was the least? So the best part about being an environmental attorney was just knowing that I was working on behalf of environmental protection, and being able to feel good about that every day, and know that all of my effort was going someplace that I really cared about. The least good part is the least good part of being any kind of attorney. I think there are drawbacks to the profession. It's demanding. It's hard work intellectually. It's unpredictable. So particularly if you work in litigation or you're going to court, it can be, you can't have a lot of plans for your life, because you're going to have to change them, or you have to be super flexible. Like, there were many vacations I've spent in the lobby of the hotel working on something because I had to, because there was a deadline. So that was the worst, sort of the structure. I didn't spend any time outside as an environmental attorney. I mean, I spent time outside because I like to spend time outside. I did things that had to do with air quality. So there wasn't really a place to go look at or investigate that, like it's all around us. And so it was more about atmospheric chemistry and science than it was about places or geography. There are environmental lawyers who spend tons of time in the field, particularly those who are doing work around public lands. So particularly here in Oregon and in the West, we have tons of land that is public, whether it's federal park or Bureau of Land Management land. There's just lots of land out there that is publicly accessible. It belongs to the public. And there are watchdog groups that try to make sure the government manages those places well. And those lawyers spend time in those places making sure, ground truthing. Say there's a timber sale or there's a road building project, and you actually have to go out there and see what's going on. Water quality attorneys spend time in kayaks out in the water and taking water samples. And so it really is diverse. I didn't spend a lot of time outside, but other environmental attorneys would. Let me, I think I've got a few more minutes. Is that right?
Yeah, it's good. You're good.
Okay. I just want to tell you about the resources we have at PCC. If you're interested in a legal career, we have a paralegal program. We've been around since the 70s. So we've got graduates all over Portland working in everywhere. So we have a really good alumni network. And our, people in Portland in the legal field generally will know that we exist. And so we have a 2-year program and a 1-year certificate for people who already have a degree. So you can get a 2-year degree from us straight out of high school. Or if you, let's say you go get the Oregon transfer degree, you want to get that degree because you want to transfer as a junior to PSU. You can do that, graduate from PSU, come back to PCC for a year and get the paralegal certificate. It's an introduction to US law, and we focus heavily on practical skills, particularly legal analysis, legal research, and legal writing, interviewing and investigation, ethics, like I was sort of talking about. You've got to keep our clients' secrets and we owe them diligence. Those are our ethical duties. And then there's tons of computer work. Tech is an important part of the legal industry. So if you're interested in the law and you're interested in tech, or you think you have an aptitude for IT, information technology, whether that's software or designing spreadsheets, or you're just into that sort of thing, that's real important and great skills for being able to get a job as a paralegal. And we have classes that focus on legal software. In terms of prereqs, if you're thinking of getting a 2-year degree in paralegal, you just have to have completed Writing 121, which is English composition, 1 class in communications, and 1 class in political science. Then you can get into the paralegal program. You can apply for entry into the paralegal program. And if you're accepted, then you'll have a special advisor who's just for paralegal students. And you'd have access to all our student resources for people interested in working in the legal field. It's not a hard program to get into. We do have an application process, but so far, every term, since we started the admissions process, every student who's wanted to attend has been able to. Okay, that's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer more questions or.
All right, students, if you have more questions, just put it in the chat. So what would be your advice to students who are interested in this kind of career?
I would say try to get to know an attorney or a paralegal or somebody who works in the legal field. And that can be me. For those of you who have no idea where to start, and we can chat about what your interests are. If you know a lawyer, let them know you might be interested in the law, have them talk to you about what they do. If you know somebody who works in a law firm, as a receptionist in a law firm, see if you can do a job shadow, go with them to work for an hour or two and just sort of see, what is this actually like in real life? I think for the legal field, it's hard because there's so much TV about the law and it can be so misleading. The other thing you can do is go watch court. Court is open to the public. It is very important to our society that court be public. And that means that anybody can go to pretty much any court proceeding anytime. And since COVID, they've all been put online. So you can actually go to the court. You can go to the Washington County Court website and look for hearings that you could watch to see what is it really like as compared to what does it look like on TV. And then my other suggestion is that you get involved in the classroom law project, in moot court, in high school. So you don't have to do any of that, but the moot court program in the state of Oregon is really great. So if your high school offers a moot court team, it's something worth looking into. The other thing is the classroom law project. So the classroom law project provides tours of courthouses for students, volunteer opportunities for students. They organize Law Day, which is a day that focuses on information about the legal system. And so if you've never heard, you might have a civics or American government, something teacher who might be interested in hooking you up with the classroom law project. Question from Evergreen was, are you allowed to record court sessions? Generally speaking, no. The Supreme Court famously won't let anybody record. Like, there are no cameras allowed in the Supreme Court when it is sitting. That's why you see drawings still of what did it look like at the argument, because photos are not allowed. They also don't like to have them record the arguments. They have caved on this, but for many years, they did not want to have their arguments recorded because they didn't want people being able to, they didn't want anything recorded that might have a negative impact on the court. So they were just like, no, we're not going to have any audio recordings. Now there are audio recordings of every Supreme Court argument. You can go to the Supreme Court's website, the US Supreme Court's website, and see the argument feeds, and you can actually listen to the attorneys and the justices talk to each other. But you're not allowed to record if you were to go to the courthouse. I used to just go to Multnomah County Courthouse and wander around looking in the doors to see what was happening. And if stuff was happening, I would just pop in and try to see what was going on. That's totally allowed. And but don't get your phone out and start filming, because that's not allowed. Also, don't wear a hat and don't drink things or eat things in the courtroom.
Is there like a selective court hearing that you can, what if it's like a murder kind of hearing? Are they allowing it to record, like for everyone to hear?
It's public. Yeah, so juvenile things are not public. Anything involving a child where a child might be testifying, that's going to be not public to protect that person. Sometimes the judge will close the courtroom. But I think if you think about some famous cases, I always think about OJ, just because that's like how old I am. We saw every second of that case in shocking detail. And that is typical. And the reason for that is that's the only way to make sure that the court system is functioning as it should is by letting people come in and see what they're doing. And so that's a very important principle for us, is the idea of public. There's no behind the scenes court. That's why everybody gets upset when you start talking about secret warrants and secret courts. And it's not how we do business in the States usually.
All right, students, if you have more questions, again, just put it in the chat. Otherwise, we are just in time. And thank you so much, Aubrey, for volunteering your time to speak to students.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. And as I said a couple times, feel free to reach out to me anytime.
So Liberty High School said thank you. And yeah, you can turn on your camera so Aubrey can see you and not just like a black screen.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being here.
Of course.
We really appreciate it.
No problem.
All right. Should we stop the recording? And
Oh, yes.
yes. Okay.